You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq. Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is, if getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now, 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
Attention business owners and independent contractors. This is a money-saving message from Tax Mediation Services. If your business owes $20,000 or more in taxes, we can help you today, right now. Listen, dealing with the IRS is no picnic. It's an intimidating and extremely stressful process, and you don't want to go it alone. Our attorneys know every law, every tax break, and every possible opportunity to help you resolve and reduce your tax debt. And if you owe more than $20,000, you may be at the top of their hit list. So don't take your tax debt lightly, because it will not go away on its own. The IRS can seize your bank accounts, your home, and even shut down your business. Call our tax experts today at 1-800-783-0810 and let us deal with the IRS while you focus on your business. That's 1-800-783-0810. Again, that's 800-783-0810.
The following program contains coarse language and adult themes. Listener discretion is advised.
We're going to be going on the air.
Good evening, everybody. It's Daraylyn Haywood and Diane for the Red Wine on KLRN Radio. We have such a great show for you tonight. We all have to operate in a political system. However, the mission of ICE, Enforcement Removal Operations of Boston, does not operate on the tide of opinion. Their mission remains the same: to remove the worst of people unlawfully present in the United States who present a threat to public safety. We're so grateful tonight to have the Boston ERO Field Director, Todd Lyons, with us to explain the end of 287G, ICE detainers, and share the arrests of the most egregious offenders who deal in death and destruction. Todd, thank you for being with us tonight. We were really grateful to have you.
No, I'm really thankful that you guys allowed me to come on and kind of really explain what the mission of ERO, what the mission of ICE is up here in Boston and in the rest of New England.
Well, we understand your mission is to remove the most egregious offenders. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's one of the misnomers of ICE is a lot of folks think that we're out there rounding up everyone that's just here illegally, trying to have a better life. In fact, when you look at statistically and just more recently in the media, I would even go to say 99% of our actual arrests here in Massachusetts are all a felony or above, or a really significant, serious misdemeanor, like someone arrested 2 to 3 times for operating while under the influence, or assault and battery on a family member. So what ICE ERO is really focused on here in Massachusetts is that worst of the worst out of the community. Those people that you don't want in our neighborhoods, right, that aren't here for a better life, that are exploiting our immigration system, and are really causing problems for other law enforcement agencies. So we have the ability to remove that public safety threat or that repeat offender from the equation before they can go ahead and harm or re-victimize someone or pretty much strike again.
We've seen some crazy arrests. You guys are busy, and please tell your whole entire team that we pray for their safety. And you've arrested MS-13 members, murderers, rapists, pedophiles. I mean, really the worst of the worst here in New England. And maybe you want to share some of those arrests with some of our listeners.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, Boston specifically in Massachusetts, out of all the ICE field officers, we've seen the most foreign fugitives that have come to the state to hide pretty much in plain sight, right? So we've arrested individuals that were in the top 10 most wanted for Brazil. We arrested a former Brazilian police officer that was wanted for mass murder, killing 13 people in a village, who came here to Massachusetts. We arrested a murderer on Martha's Vineyard that was here illegally. Another child sex rapist that was living on Martha's Vineyard. Just tonight, before I came on with you all, Fox News National had on our arrest that we just made in Gloucester of another sex offender. So these are definitely folks that you don't want living next door to you. You don't want in your neighborhood. So when ICE gets a lot of pushback about what our mission is, or when it gets kind of politicized, we always have to wonder. People can't argue with us on these type of arrests, right? When they say us removing someone back to their home country that's wanted for, like I said, mass murder, or wanted for child exploitation, rape of a child, rape of a minor. To me, I don't think anyone in Massachusetts or the rest of the Commonwealth would be upset that we're taking that individual into custody and removing that public safety threat from the community.
Yeah, we just want to know how are they released? I mean, the job of the government, in my eyes, their first job is to protect the citizens of the United States, and these judges and some local law enforcement and sheriffs are refusing to honor detainers. So is this because we're a sanctuary state? Is that why we're drawing so many murderers and rapists and pedophiles and officials that refuse to protect the citizens by not honoring your detainers? And could you explain maybe what the process is for someone to get on an ICE list and what a detainer is?
Oh, no, sure. So, when someone's arrested, whether it's here in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, anywhere in the United States, when they're arrested and they're fingerprinted, those fingerprints, when they're live scanned, meaning that it's electronically based, web-based, it's being uploaded to the FBI database, which shares that with DHS, which subsequently comes to ICE. So when individuals are encountered either at the border, when they're apprehended or arrested by Border Patrol or U.S. and Customs and Border Protection, CBP, or when they come through, say they come lawfully on a visa, a B1, B2 visitor visa that they only can stay for 6 months, or someone's here on a student visa, they've been fingerprinted and those fingerprints are on file. So when we see that a local agency has arrested someone, and then we especially see what those crimes are, we go ahead and place what's called an ICE detainer, which is pretty much, it's a request. It's twofold. It's a request for information, and it's also a request to let ICE know when that individual is being released and have the opportunity for us to go ahead and take custody of that individual. Here in Massachusetts, there are majority of jurisdictions that don't honor those detainers or don't call us. Some agencies or some jurisdictions that do say they do call us or work with us, we'll get the call and they'll say, hey, by the way, so-and-so is in our custody. You have 15 minutes to get here before he's walked out the door. He just posted bail. At that point, we can't get there in time. So then it's a
detainer for 48 hours.
So we do ask for 48 hours. We used to ask for 72, not including the weekend. And a lot of these jurisdictions just don't work with us. And that's what's the frustrating thing, is because my officers, these individuals are in a secure location. They don't have any weapons on them. They've been searched. We can take custody of them in a safe way. But instead, they're re-released back to the community, to hide in plain sight. A lot of these individuals, when the local jurisdiction arrests them, or let's say Mass State Police stops them and they give them an ID or give them a name, by the time they get them back to the barracks or get them to the police station for processing, it's not the individual who they thought they were. So
well, that's no secret to us, right? And law enforcement, because we've had people, as a former law enforcement officer myself, we've had people say, listen, don't say my name. But a number of times, I've reported to my superiors, listen, we should call ICE, and they've been refused. So it's super frustrating when the local, the law enforcement and the state police are trying to do the right thing, and it seems like their own agencies are working against us, and we have a hard time understanding that.
Yeah, and to give credit to a lot of people behind the scenes too, there are a lot of officers, supervisors, chiefs, commanders that do work with us. Most recently, we did have great collaboration and a great arrest with Massachusetts State Police. So I think that a lot of agencies, a lot of jurisdictions are starting to really realize the benefit of having ICE, especially ERO, as a public safety partner, especially when they can see that we can remove that, criminal public safety threat right there and then from their jurisdiction, especially with some of these repeat offenders when it comes to heroin distribution, fentanyl. We have folks released countless numbers of times with no notification to ICE. They've been previously deported 2 or 3 times, done federal time for reentry after deportation, which actually is a federal felony. So a lot of times, just kind of for your listeners, a lot of the immigration we actually work with when it's coming to deal with law enforcement agencies, for us, it's what's considered administrative. So civil, you always hear about the civil immigration civil enforcement of immigration. So there are a lot of criminal statutes that are attached to it, but we do have one, which is USC 1326, which is the deportation of a reentry foreign felon. So that's a felony right there. So you would think at least, that's a felon in their presence. You'd want to turn that over to the agency. So it can be really frustrating, especially when my folks have to go back out into the community where they don't know if that individual is going to have a gun or if there are other dangerous people in that house, right? Or we had the opportunity to take them into custody, and now they've reoffended. They've raped someone else. They've committed another murder, had another DUI with a crash with injuries. So I think a lot of people in Massachusetts are starting to see that, especially with a lot of work we've done in the media and opportunities to talk to you tonight and just have the chance to tell the real story of what we do.
And that's why I did have a question. I mean, I know the mood right now, I think in the country as a whole right now, especially with what just happened with the murder down in Georgia of the nursing student, and finding out that the person that committed this, of course, was not only here illegally. His brother gets arrested for having a fake green card, but that he had been released with no bail or personal recognizance in New York in October. And I'm wondering, do you see a lot of these, I guess I'll call them frequent flyer repeat offenders that take off from other states and kind of like try to blend in like, Massachusetts? Or how hard is it when the local police obviously just let them go and, with your 15-minute warning, for them to disappear and then just to turn up in another state, unfortunately, after like a heinous crime that was committed?
We do see a lot of those. We've seen an uptick in individuals that have been encountered or arrested in other states. And it was kind of what we were talking about before the intro of the show. Right now, there's a backlog in immigration court for new non-citizens, asylum seekers to have their opportunity to go in front of an immigration judge. So when they do have their notice to appear in their court date, they are really banking on and hoping having that process paperwork. So now they go ahead and apply for state benefits. They want to apply for a work permit, things like that. For an example, the city of New York, their backlog is out to 2036. Massachusetts, we're not that bad. We're lucky. We're still in this decade. But we see a lot of folks that will come up here. We've had people come from Miami, New Jersey, New York, in order for my office to process them to try to get an earlier court date so they can kind of move their case quicker and move it down the road so they can get public assistance benefits, things like that.
What about licenses? What's your feeling on, people say, we should give them licenses so they can work, but are you finding people with multiple licenses? And, do you have a thought or an opinion, if you're allowed to express one, about the frustration of some states giving illegals a license? We don't really know who they are.
So, yeah, and it's not that I'm barred from talking about licenses. I would love to talk to you about the Massachusetts R&V and the driver's license issues. However, they took away our access to it. When the new law came out, we were subsequently notified that if you're a federal agency, you no longer have access to R&V records. So I can't check someone's driver's license. If someone's issued a Massachusetts driver's license and they're using that as a new identity, we can't have access to run that name or date of birth through our systems. We won't. If we go to a house and there's two vehicles in the driveway, Massachusetts plates, we can't run those plates, and we won't give us information on if that person has a concealed weapons permit, if that's another wanted felon in the house.
Wow.
So one of the downsides to the new driver's license law in Massachusetts is they took away our access. And the worst part is they made it so if any law enforcement agency shares R&V data with ICE, they'll take away and fine those agencies. Yeah,
Well, I know from my own personal experience that the RMV has facial recognition. So if there is someone who gets a license with the same biographical information but a different face, say one in Haverhill and one Hyannis, overnight it's like boop, 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 boop. And, a notification goes out to Hyannis and Haverhill that says, hey, this is not the right, the biographical information is the same, but the faces are different. And what we do about it in Massachusetts is absolutely nothing. And that's why I was so against illegal aliens getting a driver's license. And these are things that law enforcement knows, but the regular public doesn't know. So it seems like your efforts are being countered, by laws.
Yeah, and not to use too much law enforcement jargon, but so it's our identifying number, right? Our ORI.
Mm-hmm.
For ICE. So it's not just the Boston field office. Let's say the ERO Los Angeles is out on operation and they identify two individuals in a car and they have a Massachusetts driver's license and they go to run it. If the state automatically blocks anything that comes from ICE, whether in all 50 states, anything that
That's
comes
insane.
From yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing. Can
you go across the border into New Hampshire and have one of the New Hampshire offices pull it? I'm not kidding you. I mean, I would imagine that the New Hampshire offices would probably do it. That's crazy.
I can say we've had a lot of great law enforcement partner support. But that's one of those things that's really frustrating that I kind of thought it was all one team, one fight. And to have such a tool taken away from us, and the state gave us the opportunity to kind of make an appeal and present our case to why we had all these cases that we identified. The ones on Martha's Vineyard we identified through Massachusetts driver's license. Those were wanted murderers. Our mass murderer from Brazil, he had a new Massachusetts driver's license. So we were able to track a lot of these folks down prior to the new law going into effect, and we were trying to use that as, I guess our proof that it works, and we're not out there just combing through R&V data to try to find illegal folks. But in the end, they took away our access, and so now we're we're stuck trying to find different means to locate these public safety threats and these foreign fugitives.
And I would think that a lot of people that may have voted, in my mind, in error to allow them to have licenses probably didn't educate themselves on this aspect. And now, of course, when they're finding you're doing these arrests, they're like, great, that is great. I'm so glad they arrested that man. But realizing that he probably could have been detained and removed prior to any, horrible event happening. And that was prevented by the state of Massachusetts when this law was passed and they added that piece into the law. And I think when people realize that, they're going to be very angry about it.
It was an add-on from the Attorney General's office after the law had passed.
Yep.
It was one of those really, I'm not a legal eagle, so there was something added in there that things could be added later after the bill passed, and this was one of them. So,
and that's insane that something can be added after a bill is passed. I mean, that's crazy.
Well, and then a lot of the other frustration we have for our folks too. We totally understand that immigration enforcement, we're one of the few law enforcement agencies that does ebb and flow with each new administration. Even though we've had immigration laws officially on the books since 1956 and 1963 that are still current, that are still benefits to public safety, depending on which administration is in or which party, everything's done by executive order. So for morale, it's hard to get our officers excited because every 4 to 8 years, it may be some way different that we do law enforcement.
Is that something that congressional leaders should be, obviously working on to make a law so that it's not executive order? Or
for us in the field, we would just hope that we would be given the opportunity to exercise the current laws now, and if they change them, give us the tools that we can go ahead and make a difference. Because that's what we did as law enforcement officers, signed up to protect the law, protect people, enforce law. It's really frustrating when we do get, and I hate to use the word hampered, but we're really limited on some things that we can do. When we first started talking earlier, when we were talking about the detainer situation, and a lot of my colleagues all over the country, especially the Northeast right now, New York and Atlanta, two of the big ones, my two partner field office directors, they're really having to deal a lot with detainers not honored. But we had agencies in Massachusetts that actually go to the media and brag on and put out press releases on how many detainers they don't honor. So that's even the worst part. I think if you're a citizen of the state or you're a citizen of that city, when the people that are sworn to protect you actually put on a press release saying that, hey, we didn't take these criminals into custody, right?
And that would be people who ended the 287G. I don't know if many people understand what that is. If you could.
Sure. Yeah, the 287G, believe it or not, with everything that was said about it, it was a great program. Basically, under 287G, it's a part of the immigration law where ICE is allowed to deputize certain jurisdictional officers, mostly from sheriff's offices or county jails, which it's a force multiplier for us. So they, in turn, act as ICE agents. What they're doing is they're screening those individuals that come in to the jail daily. They're going to see what that person, they've been trained to figure out what the people's immigration status is, understand their cases, go ahead and identify those for ICE, and either place detainers on them or place them into immigration proceedings based on their crimes. Barnstable County was an amazing partner for us. And one part of the program is we do have to have town halls. We have to have people the opportunity to come in and speak. Since I've been the director, I've been down to the Cape previously with former sheriff, kind of explaining what the situation is. And kind of to the point I said about our media stories, when citizens hear these cases that are coming out of 287G, and it's not a lot. You may have anywhere from depending on the jurisdiction, 15 to 25 cases a year. But they're murderer, rapist, fentanyl dealer. So it's not like someone's being arrested for operating without a driver's license or being found in an open container or shoplifting. No, these are really bad folks that you want to see released and you want to see get put into the immigration system.
Jimmy Cummings was my first boss when I was on the state police, and he was the former Barnstable County sheriff. The new sheriff complained that there was too much cost to the public. And, I think the cost of releasing criminals into our community is far worse than what she purports the cost would be.
Yeah, with Barnstable County now, unfortunately, we don't have that relationship anymore. Those deputies are barred from even answering our emails, talking to us on the phone. Some of your listeners and yourself might remember there was a case this summer. A lady got in her car, and there was someone in the back seat who was laying back in there hiding. He was in the country illegally. We asked to interview him so we could take him into custody, and we weren't allowed access to him.
That's criminal.
So that's like I said, that's one of the frustrating things, especially coming from an agency we had such a great partnership to where now you don't have any, and especially when you tell another jurisdiction like, hey, it's kind of like the teacher with the foot stomp, and this might be on the test, right? Like, hey, you might want to really take a look at this guy. He's not who it is, or he's a pretty bad dude, and we still get no response or no help. So I think that should be a concern for the citizens. Take everything out of the side of the politicization of immigration enforcement and law enforcement working with immigration. You hear a lot about the chilling aspect, the chilling effect. It's really about public safety.
What do some of your colleagues say about, fentanyl dealers? I personally had, a cousin overdose on heroin, and like I said, I worked undercover narcotics, and, we're not helping these people by not securing our border. And what are you seeing with, your colleagues seeing with human trafficking and fentanyl deaths and cartels?
Yeah, no, that's one of the biggest things. Like you, I lost my cousin to a fentanyl overdose, and unfortunately, it was while I was in the job here now, and it was later tracked back that those drugs came from a previously deported felon out of my office that returned to the United States.
Wow.
So I've seen it firsthand what it can do to families. They're frustrated too because these, a lot of these same patrolmen, a lot of these same detectives arrest the same folks over and over, and especially in some jurisdictions, some cities. When my officers arrest these people, they've actually put handcuffs on these individuals 2 or 3 times, and they've deported them back to their home nation. These people have been presented to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They've got some time in Fed time for entering after deportation, yet they still come back here. And that's the frustrating thing, I think, for a lot of my colleagues and a lot of my law enforcement partners outside of ICE is the fact that we put a lot of emphasis on fentanyl control and heroin trafficking, yet the one key piece about it is the repeat offender that is a foreign national that officers aren't being allowed to work with another federal agency to remove that criminal element from their jurisdiction.
Yeah, I remember we even had a judge in I think it was in our former hometown of Newton, Shelley Josephs, that
sneaking them out the back door.
Right. So, I wonder sometimes, why our own government is working against us like this. And it's got to be frustrating. I know it's frustrating for a lot of my friends that are still in law enforcement. And if you could just take back to your team that, this seems to be a way to kind of beat us down, to acquiesce to allowing this kind of behavior. And we're so grateful to them. Have you, hopefully you haven't lost any officers due to the malfeasance of other agencies not honoring, a detainer?
No, we haven't. Knock on wood. We've had some of my officers have been injured. We had 3 of our special response team individuals, they got hurt on a case where it was another detainer released. And the one thing for when it comes to, like I said earlier, morale and employee retention, I have limited resources in Massachusetts. We're one of the smaller field offices when it comes to ICE and ERO overall. We don't have the manpower or the bandwidth that a lot of the larger cities do, like New York City, LA, and of course all of border offices. So for my folks, it's very hard for them to have to look at the daily printouts that come in about individuals that were arrested and say, okay, we don't have enough people to go get the fentanyl dealer and the child sex offender. We have to pick one of the two. And then hopefully we can go back out at a later date and track down the one we can't get today. And that's
our task forces, our drug task force, our DEA, our state police violent fugitive task force. Is there any way to pass on that information to them, or are they also banned?
So the federal task forces, U.S. Marshals, the Grade, DEA, ATF, they're all amazing partners. Mass fugitive guys, they are great. Again, a lot of them can't do the immigration work like we do. The other issue is, too, though, we have so many individuals that are reporting to our office daily from the southwest border that I've had to put so many of my resources to working our front doors with that massive lines that we get, that I had to take away street teams in order to deal with processing all these folks that have been released from the southwest border that are now coming to Massachusetts that we have to get into the immigration system. So
that's demoralizing for the morale. I totally understand that just from law enforcement. When we couldn't get more than a desk and two officers to operate from Provincetown, to the Sagamore Bridge, that's 80 square miles. It seems like less people want to join law enforcement, and I hope the tides change in the future so that we are more supported. I remember in the days of when Andrew Lelling was the U.S. attorney. I think those are a little bit of a better time. So we hope that does change. And what we're trying to do is to educate the public to let them know, not to, listen to this BS of these elected officials that are telling us that, these people are, we need workforce housing and, are illegal people allowed to even work? And that's how they sold it to us. They needed licenses so that they could work. And now we need to build all this infrastructure and give them $10,000 on an EBT card when I don't believe it's even legal for them to work, correct?
So they can't work until they get their actual work permits. So they get authorization from Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is our civilian counterpart. And a lot of that is by going through the immigration system. You need to having your asylum case be positively found, or you've now are gone in front of a judge and your case may take some time. You'll have the opportunity to get your work permit, but it still takes a while. That's why we had so many folks from Miami, from Georgia, New York coming to Massachusetts to try to get that earlier court date. So that's very frustrating. And it was frustrating for us too to see that we had, when they opened up Joint Base Cape Cod, and we had an individual there wanted for homicide out of Honduras in the temporary shelters right next to Coast Guard base housing.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Weren't happy with it either, and we understand that some of that Coast Guard housing has been taken over as well. And I find it egregious, and so does Diane, that we're spending $45 million a month here in Massachusetts, and we can't put some of that money to Boston ERO or to our border officials. This isn't sustainable.
No, it really isn't. It's not sustainable for my office as well right now, the way it is. I also have the northern border. So I pretty much go from the end of Maine all the way to Lake Champlain in Vermont, and I share the Swanton sector for the Border Patrol with ERO Buffalo, and that's the busiest sector on the northern border right now. And when you think about the numbers that we encounter up there compared to what my colleagues on the southwest border are dealing with, it's night and day. However, when you don't have the infrastructure to deal with these individuals, and you have a larger, more porous area that's already been depleted of resources because other agencies such as Customs and Border or Border Patrol have had to deploy their folks to the southwest border, it really makes it hard. So when we have 150 to 170 individuals come through on the Buffalo side from Bangladesh, that's a pretty big weekend for that office, right? So it's tough, and it puts a strain too on our northern states in New England. We're constantly meeting with folks in Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, because they're starting to see that influx. It's become cheaper with the cartels and pretty much individuals who want to come into the country legally to fly to Toronto or Montreal and just make their way down through Vermont or New Hampshire.
I know that the governor in New Hampshire, Sununu, is very concerned about the northern border. And I wanted to ask, I know obviously Massachusetts is no cooperation, but for the other New England states that you go through, is there one state that has the best type of cooperation where they work very well with ICE, law enforcement and, ICE together, finding the unlawful, I'm not even going to call them residents, but anyways, the unlawful ones, is there one or a couple of particular states that work, with ICE hand in hand, or?
Sure. I mean, yeah, we do have states that are great partners. New Hampshire's obviously one. They would like to do more with us. It's just unfortunate that we just don't have the resources, the infrastructure to really do that with them now. They're a great partner. State of Maine is a great partner. Vermont, they've been very helpful. Even though state of Connecticut has the SAFE Act, which kind of bars a lot of jurisdictions from working with ICE. On the worst of the worst, they will deal with us. Rhode Island sheriffs agree. They'll work with us. It seems to be more pockets in areas where there's a lot more pushback, if that's the right word to use, or lack of cooperation, right? And then that kind of bleeds over though, because then you have a lot of other jurisdictions that, and I totally get the law enforcement leaders' position when they call and say, "Hey, we would love to help you. We'll work with you behind closed doors. We'll help you. Yeah. Just please leave us out of your press release if you do anything." Right? It's just sad that we have to work like that, because I would love to.
We have such weak police leaders that won't stand up, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would love to highlight some of the police leaders we have. I mean, they're absolutely great. We do have some really, really strong partners who do care. I just think, unfortunately, we're just such a divide and such a pivotal point when it comes to immigration enforcement and how that's really going to play out, or how it's painted. And then, yeah, I guess I'm just happy that a lot of folks have now seen a lot of our press releases. To have your story retweeted by folks around the country, it's kind of it. You don't want to say it's waking people up, but it is. It's kind of waking people up to see that there's no really negative downside to working with ICE, right?
No, I think what was interesting is the various states, that they do polls in, and it just seems like it's been consistent that illegal immigration is extremely important to residents of most of, I think, the states in the country. And I think with, you're right. The narrative was tainted by ICE by saying you're rounding up families, just trying to make a living and whatnot. And, when a narrative gets like that, it obviously gets in people's minds, and they don't realize that by lumping everybody as a whole, which is what they did when it came to Massachusetts, by putting that, addendum on the bill, which I still think is illegal, but that blocked you completely. And I don't think a lot of those voters that voted to, go ahead and give the illegal aliens driver's licenses knew that was in there, because I honestly think if they had, there's no way that would have passed. No way.
Yeah. And, really why I'm so happy that you kind of reached out and gave us the opportunity to come on and speak, because there are a lot of folks that only hear one side of it. And I can give you a prime example. We had a case, and it was out of South Boston District Court, and it got painted in the media that there was this poor individual that was trying to get his life back on track. He couldn't get to work. His driver's license. It said in the media report that all he was there for was there was something wrong with his license. He was trying to straighten out the issue. But as he left court, black ICE vans showed up, and agents in black raid gear arrested him, threw him in, taken away from his family. All he's trying to do is work. Well, the issue that they left out of his driver's license was it wasn't his name. He was also a previously deported fentanyl dealer that had an active felony warrant under the name he had taken over, right? So we tried to get that narrative changed, but of course they never wanted to. We reached out to certain outlets and they say, okay, well, thanks for the info, and you never see like a retraction or a reprint, right? So all everybody knows is we're driving around arresting people with bad driver's license without hearing that whole story. And the one that I kind of highlighted earlier, to wake up in the morning and see on the front page of the Herald, Boston police ignored 12 detainers. I went to our public affairs people, and I'm like, no, it was actually a lot more than 12, and I want to go out there and highlight that you actually ignored more, right? So that to have, like I said, to have agencies kind of be happy with putting out how many times they don't work with us, I think it's just a bad narrative overall for the state of law enforcement, pretty much.
That's and especially with what's been going on with the your arrest that you've made and what happened down in Georgia. I think that type of bragging, people will now start taking notice of it, and they will say, "Wait a minute, how do we know that those 12, the 12 detainers wasn't someone that went out and robbed somebody or killed somebody and they can just disappear?" And I think people are frustrated by that.
There was another one of my colleagues dealing with right now at the Washington, D.C. field office. They had an individual previously deported, detainer not honored. He shot at 3 police officers the other night after he got out. And then in Maryland, there was a previously deported Honduran individual that was released on another charge and then subsequently went out and killed a 2-year-old.
Oh, my God.
So,
oh, my God.
I think as more and more of these stories are going to start coming up and more people start paying attention to working with ICE, it might actually be a good thing. I hope the climate changes. My colleague down in the Baltimore office just had a pretty good achievement that Montgomery County actually invited them for a conversation and said, hey, all right, let's talk about this. How can we at least do detainers on these egregious cases? And that's the other thing too. Like we in Massachusetts, even though I don't have the manpower to do it, we will put a detainer on every non-citizen that's arrested. Obviously, we'll focus on the most egregious cases, but if we have enough of the manpower, we'll go all the way down to the low ones, because a lot of the low ones too, what a lot of agencies don't realize is we're reaching out to them because this individual may have been in North Dakota and this is his 8th OUI, or he came from New York where he was just involved in a assault and battery, even though he might have just got arrested for shoplifting, let's say in Quincy, he might be, wanted somewhere else. So for agencies like Montgomery County down in Maryland to kind of come to the table and actually open up that line of dialogue to say, okay, hey, let's talk about this, I think it's a step in a huge direction.
Can you publish the detainers just like you publish the arrests? I think that would be, such an eye-opener to people. If you publish the detainer with the egregious crime that's attached to it, and then the people of the county or the state or would be able to hold those officials who ignore it accountable. Is that legal to do?
No, so we're bound by a lot of freedom of information, a lot of PII, public identity, that fancy word. But there's a lot of things that kind of tie our hands that we can't do from DHS. So I would love to do that kind of data. We do data releases, and usually around the fiscal year, but by the time that comes out, we've already surpassed those numbers. It just keeps going up every year.
It's just too many to say, a detainer for a 34-year-old white male for a child rape was issued in the town or for the town of Falmouth or for the state of Massachusetts, or just for some way for the public to understand that you're doing your job, but other people aren't allowing you to go, to follow through with that.
Oh, yeah, and that's kind of the point where I was going with how we put detainers on everything is if that individual goes out and reoffends or rapes another child or kills someone in an OUI, I never want anyone coming back and saying, ICE didn't let us know. We're going to do our best to let you know. We're trying to take care of that situation because we've seen that before in the past. That I just want to make sure we're doing our part. Even if they don't honor those detainers, we're going to go ahead and send it to them anyways.
Well, that's what happened.
I mean, do you have like a wall of shame for like certain departments out there that, just completely, I mean, obviously Boston was bragging about it, but is there like, probably shouldn't say a wall of shame because obviously they're doing what they're ordered to do. But, obviously the departments where I should say the most frustrating department. How about that?
Yeah, we do. We definitely have great partners we like to work with. Right. We'll be out there every time we call them to help or we let them know we're going to go make an arrest. They'll out there and support us. And then we definitely have those jurisdictions where emails and phone calls just aren't returned. So yeah, it's pretty much all around the state. It runs a complete gamut of the great support that we have to absolutely none. To almost
and of course, those departments will be the ones that'll be like, "You never told us," and then you'll pull it out and say, "Oh yes, we did 6 times."
So what's really hard for us in Massachusetts is sometimes we might place that detainer with the agency, and that the agency will put that detainer in the prisoner's file, and it will go to the sheriff, and the sheriffs will keep that detainer there, and it gets to the courthouse, and the courthouse will just say, no, he's got to be released. Right. So that detainer kind of travels with the prisoner, detainee, the non-citizen the whole way through, and it might be a jurisdiction that is great to work with, loves us, and then that detainer might get to a house of corrections and he could get released, or it might get to a district court and it will get released. And
unreal.
That's the other hard part for us too, especially with a lot of the courts, is if there's not an ICE officer to take custody of that individual, they'll just release them.
Are they allowed to arrest in court, Todd?
So that was my other part. I was going, so we can no longer make arrests in courthouses or outside or near any courthouse or probation office. It's considered a sensitive location. There are different examples in ways that we can, especially if that individual is going to be detained and turned over to the sheriff's department. We arrest them in their lockup. But no, we just can't go in and arrest someone in a courthouse or arrest them in the lobby or as they're leaving. That's one of the new sensitive locations where we're not allowed to go.
Unbelievable. If you had an opportunity to kind of fix this, it would have to be executive order.
Well, I think for us right now, no. As far as us for enforcing immigration laws on the worst of the worst, no. What we would need is an honest, just down to earth, in the trenches talk with law enforcement leaders and state officials to explain exactly what we're doing. And if we could start at the worst of the worst, I would be 100% happy. It'd be a huge leap for us. That would fix so many problems. Just to have that type of cooperation and to us kind of not be labeled as the boogeyman no more, right? I think it's a long way.
Well, we hope that you'll come back. We have about 30 seconds left, but our Diane and I like to educate the public and be as factual as we can. And you've given us so much that people need to digest. I really think, when we post this and people have a chance to listen, if they're not already listening live, I think they're going to be flabbergasted,
outraged.
Outraged.
No, and like I said, I really appreciate you all giving us this chance. Even if it's a bad ice story, I want the public to hear it from me, right? I want to take out all the cloak and dagger to it. I'd rather you hear the real story from exactly what's going on. And, that's opened myself up to a lot of threats. Unfortunately, I had protesters show up at my house that my family had to deal with. But I would much rather be the voice for the men and women of ICE, especially ERO Boston, and everyone in the state and Commonwealth hear exactly the issues or the good things we're doing or the bad thing we did, right? I'm just happy that platforms like this have given us the opportunity just to kind of educate the person that might not know exactly what the story was, just a little bit more info that they can decide on themselves how they feel about the law enforcement we're doing.
It's hard sometimes to speak up and to speak out, and we're grateful for people like you that will do it and still take, the daggers for everybody else. And as far as the red wine goes and all our listeners, please tell your whole team that we're praying for them. We pray for you. We appreciate everything they do. And, I don't know what we can do about the morale other than to know that this is educating the public to know exactly what you're dealing with. And we are behind you 100%. And we will still keep educating the public and finding ways that we can make some positive change for all you guys.
That'd be
yes,
great.
Thank you guys very much.
Yeah, no, thank you all for what you guys do too, and like I said, let me come on here and tell the good works that my men and women do, because they do some great stuff for the Commonwealth. So I really appreciate the invite.
We'd love to have you back again.
All right, great, thanks. Good talking to you.
Thank you so much. Have a great week. Have a great
Bye-bye.
week, everybody.